academics, and so this is a perfect venue. So I was very excited when I was invited to speak here. And thank you for coming out specifically today, on this lovely night. But just to put it in perspective, we're still about 250 degrees warmer than space, right? And the reason I bring that up is because I want to tell you a story which is about astronomy first, space. And it's a story that is personally very inspiring to me. And it's also an important story because I think it really tells us a lot about women and what's been happening over the years and where we are today. So this story starts back in the late 1870s at Harvard. So Harvard had a very famous observatory back then, and there was all kinds of interesting astronomy happening, research happening there. And in fact, this picture is the kind of picture that the telescope at Harvard was taking. And this is essentially, you collect light from stars, and there's prisms inside the telescopes which break up the light, so you can look at different parts of the light. So that's why you have this spectrum, and hidden in that light is all the information about the stars. This one is a particularly important one. This is the spectrum of our sun. So that's what the sun really looks like. And in fact, those dark lines, they are not, scratches in the plates or anything. That's really what the sun looks like. The reason there are those black lines is because some of the light is missing. It's dark. And those particular colors are missing. The reason they're missing is because while that light was coming to us from the sun's core, the surface of the sun, there's all kinds of gases. So some of the light is being absorbed by those gases. And the specific colors that are absorbed, like where the lines are, tell us what the gas was. So it's like a signature. It's really like the fingerprint. Each gas, hydrogen, helium, which are the most common ones, they each have their own fingerprint. It's kind of useful for us. We can figure it out. So this is what was happening in Harvard in the 1870s. And it's very exciting because then you start cataloging different stars. It's not just the sun. You can look at all the other stars. They have their own spectra. And you can start understanding the universe. However, it's kind of boring, to be honest, right? Because you got to stare at these lines. This is way before computers, way before even, digital kinds of recording devices of any kind. We're talking, not even film. We're talking about old-style glass plates where the light was being recorded. So you got to look at them and figure out the fingerprints by eye and then calculate things. So the director of Harvard was a man named Charles Pickering, and he had a bunch of graduate students who were doing the work. They weren't doing very well because it's boring stuff, right? So he got kind of annoyed, and the story goes that he, at one point, got really upset and said, you know what, you guys are so bad at this, I'm going to get my housekeeper to do it. Even she could do a better job than he. So he actually did that. He asked his housekeeper, a woman named Wilhelmina Fleming, who was a single mother at the time, and we're talking 1870s, her husband had abandoned her. So, and she had a little son. So she had to make a living, so she was a housekeeper. Well, she found this work, I guess, more interesting. And so she started, doing this work and cataloging all these different stars. And not only did she just try to figure out what each star is made up of in terms of its gases, she started finding patterns. And so certain stars have certain fingerprints, others have other fingerprints. She started figuring out how much of hydrogen there was in different stars. And she created a catalog, the first step of a catalog of stars in the sky. Yeah, and she was great at this. Pickering was very happy. Two reasons. One, the work is getting done, and he was paying her half of what he was paying his guests. And he figured, hey, for half the price, I could get more women. So, Wilhelmina Fleming, she was the first. This is her. She's, eventually, they put together the first such catalog, which was published under the name of, she was not an author. She was, in fact, today she's credited with all this work, but it took a long, long time for her to establish that she was involved. People there knew that she was involved, which is why eventually she has got credit. She, in fact, was the one who was the first woman ever to become an honorary member of the Royal Astronomical Society in the UK, which is a big deal. So she's a famous astronomer now in her own right. Back then, she didn't get much credit at all. But she started a trend. Pickering said, hey, she's good, you know, this must be something that women can do for cheap, so I'll hire more. So he actually decided specifically to hire a bunch of women. And these women built a catalog of stars that we know of today. It is still the definitive catalog that is being used today. And they did it for 25 cents an hour. So, as you can see, this is an amazing story. Also, probably not very wide. Who here knew about this? Can you imagine this? We all want to know the name of Newton and Kepler and, you know, all these people who figured out apparently the sky. Well, no. It was a bunch of about 100 women who really figured out the sky. And they are not even mentioned in most lists of famous astronomers. And, you know, they started with almost nothing. So here's a picture. They were called Harvard's computers. Today they're called Harvard's computers. There were about 80 to 100, I believe, total over the years. They built a catalog where they actually observed about 500,000, maybe 400,000 stars. Yeah, by eye, this kind of work. And a few of them became famous astronomers in their own right, because this was a start. So although this was not perfect, it was the only place where women were getting to do this kind of work. So one of the women in this story was particularly, you know, interesting, especially to me, because when she was hired as a computer, her name is Henrietta Leavitt. She was given a particular job saying, go and look at these particular stars which actually have an interesting property. They grow, they don't have the same light. They go brighter and dimmer over time, right? So they pulsate. You know, they're called variable stars. Their light is variable. So she started observing them, and what she found was incredible. She found a relationship between that brightness and how much actual energy they had in the star. That determined how fast they would be pulsating. And from that, it turns out that we can figure out a way to measure distances to really far away places, like other galaxies, which until then nobody knew how to do. We could measure something in the maybe solar system, but nothing beyond that. And if you think about it, if you look up at the sky, everything looks the same distance, right? It's not like you can really tell. So this was key. Without knowing how far anything was, really couldn't explore the universe. This is what started it. Thanks to her work, the size of the Milky Way was measured. Our distance from the center was measured, the center of the Milky Way. We figured out, hey, we're not in the center of the Milky Way. So all these things happened. And then, because distance was so important, another astronomer, famous astronomer, Edwin Hubble, the Hubble telescope. And again, you know, the famous names happen to surprisingly be male, maybe not so surprisingly. Anyhow, Hubble, of course, and absolutely also a very, very brilliant astronomer. He used Leavitt's work to look at, to calculate distances to different galaxies, and also how fast they were moving. The two combined, and he found an incredible thing. Found out that all these galaxies are moving. That was the first discovery of the Big Bang. Started by, you know, this catalog of stars, this method of distances, all done by women, to this incredible discovery. Literally the origins of the universe happened here. And then the most amazing part, this story has a great finale because it connects directly to us here in Canada. There's an important Canadian contribution in this. So if we know that the universe is expanding, everything's moving away, and we know how fast it's expanding, we can rewind. Or at least calculate. We can't actually rewind it, but we can do a simulation which rewinds it at the right, correct rate, which will tell us how long it will take to rewind right to the start. Which will tell us when it actually started, which is telling us the age of the universe. Huge thing to know, of course, about our origin. fact, this was done many, many times. Hubble was the first to do it. But most recently, Wendy Friedman did this. She's actually a Canadian, born and raised in Toronto. And she used the Hubble telescope to take all these amazing measurements and was able to calculate the rate of expansion of the universe, from which, of course, you can calculate the age of the universe. So she won a very prestigious prize for this work, called the Gruber Prize, in 2009. So what an incredible story, starting in 1870, involving all these incredible women and men working jointly to figure out where we come from and when it all started. There's one more piece, which is my favorite piece of the story. Not all of this, of course, is great, but the next piece in that story of the computers happened also in Harvard. One of the women who came right after these Harvard computers had left the stars was a woman named Cecilia Payne. And she actually was not hired as a computer. She came to Harvard because she wanted to do a PhD in astronomy. Well, that was not possible. Harvard didn't have female students doing PhDs. So she actually enrolled in Radcliffe, which was a sister university. But she did all her observations and work through the observatory and using this star catalogs, all this data. And back then was when there was this whole new theory in physics called quantum physics that was being developed. So she used the laws of quantum physics to understand, to look at these star data more closely and build a model. And all of these different patterns of fingerprints and sort of these barcodes that had been cataloged, they all look different. She found something amazing. According to her model, they all look different because they have different temperatures and so on. But really, she could prove that all those stars actually are basically hydrogen. No matter which star you look at, her theory put it all together. And because the universe is basically made of stars and gas, she figured out essentially what the whole universe is made up of. And this is her. This is Cecilia Payne. That's what her PhD was. She figured out what the universe is made of. Not too shabby. Hers was the first PhD that was earned by a woman in astronomy ever. What a way to start, right? It was from Radcliffe. She stayed on in Harvard because she loved what she was doing. Didn't get hired in any official position. Everybody knew that she was a brilliant person, but it took, I think, another 10 years for her to be even given a staff position at Harvard as astronomer. During that whole time, 10 years, I think, well, it took another 20 years for her to be given a faculty position. Yeah. During that whole time, she was teaching courses that were not even listed on the books officially that she taught. Eventually, after she became a faculty member, she went on to become the chair of the astronomy department at Harvard. The first woman to be a chair of any department ever at Harvard. Cecilia Payne, whose name I'm sure you haven't heard of. Isn't that amazing? What a story. To me, it was an incredibly inspiring story about the science, about the kinds of people who can do science, not just the men. What a great story to know of, and I feel lucky that I could find out about these women and have them as my role models. As I, embarked on my own career, I didn't choose to do research in astronomy, but I did choose quantum physics. So this is why I have a special connection to Cecilia Payne. She used quantum physics to study the stars. I used quantum physics to study atoms and molecules in my own research at the smallest scales. So it's an amazing thing to be able to do the same thing. So I guess my point being that this story, it's about all that's great about science and what we can contribute, and also all that was wrong. Back then, yes, okay, it was over 100 years ago, but truth is, have things really changed that? That's the question. And why is it today, when apparently we are in this age of information, you snap your fingers, you click on a button, you go on your iPhone, you can find out about the most crazy, silly, pieces of information. Not to mention cats galore. How many cats can you look at on the internet? and yet, she is still unknown. these stories, which led me, of course, to my own area, which is quantum mechanics. But the numbers today, this is not just my story, but the numbers today tell a little bit different story. Unfortunately, I'm still the exception, especially in physics. I don't know if you can read these numbers, but roughly what this is supposed to be showing the so-called leaky pipeline in academia. So students, when they start out in high school, it's roughly equal, male and female students in the natural sciences courses they're taking. When they choose their major, this is the first time they're actually choosing to do science or not. There's a huge drop. The ratio goes to 3 to 2, I believe, here. And that includes a large proportion of women who choose life sciences. Biology does much better than physics and computer science and certain areas of engineering still today. So if you remove that, I'm going to show you another graph about that. It's a much worse story. But even with the life sciences included, it's not half and half. And it gets worse and worse by the time you get to the PhD level. At each stage, there's fewer and fewer men and women, no doubt. But the number of women dropping out, or the proportion of women dropping out, is high still today. And this is very, very recent data from, I believe this is from 2007 as the PhD. So this is tracking the same group who graduated in 97. So just to have that same progression rate. If you look at the number of degrees earned broken down by area, I know again it's hard to read, so I'll just sort of point to it. This shows the bachelor's. Red bachelor's is in life sciences, and then you have master's in life sciences is big yellow, PhD in life sciences is this one. Okay, and what's shown here is the percentage here of degrees. So I know it's again hard to read. This top one up here is 70%. Okay. So and as you go up to so this is bachelor's, master's, PhD. And you see the lowest here is engineering and computer science, which is this one here. The highest one is life sciences, which is this one for PhDs, which is not too bad. It's actually higher than 50%, shown here. And then this is mathematical and physical sciences, which is around 30% rate. So this is really the issue. And then this is pretty low. And the story gets worse and worse as you look higher up. So if you go to post-graduation, what kind of jobs are the women and the men pursuing? If you look in industry, you see that the red parts are the male proportion, female proportion. And so depending on the degrees that have been earned, you see that, let's say, for jobs which require PhDs, we're talking about 20% of that sector is female. So, still today. And again, this is 2003 data. And, there's been some improvement in the last 10 years, but incredibly slow. It's almost flat, which is ridiculous to be asked me. This is actually in academia. So if you look at faculty members, professors at different ranks, and actually no, this is for full professors, so highest rank. If you look at, again, the life sciences, 20%, so it's not really great anyway, but it gets worse and worse. So this is me, so I'm sitting in here, I guess. That's hard to read, it's about 10% at the full professor level, and then engineering is even worse, 9% full professors in Canada. So really not good news. So the question is why? What's going on? Clearly there's a difference. In some areas, life sciences being, improving faster seems to be a good news story, but weirdly, it's actually used in completely the wrong way. One of the ways this data is used is to say, hey, look, life sciences, you don't need the math and the calculation stuff, the technical, skills. So that's why women do well there, but it's because women can do math, right? So unfortunately, the good news is also used in weird ways. So the reason being, oh, it's all biological, it's nature versus environment. And here are ways, right? Girls can't do math, or, well, the data top scientists, right? Apparently we will always ignore people like Cecilia Payne, who, you know, apparently is a man, I guess, or I don't know how they explain it. But the truth is actually completely different. So I want to show you a little bit of data which completely contradicts these kinds of arguments. No matter that biology is doing better. That's not. Let's just look and see whether there's an actual difference in math skills. And that second thing, oh, that we haven't studied it well enough, not true. There is study after study after study after study, literally. It's out there. We just seem to ignore it. And the question is, why are we ignoring it? It's basically a confirmation bias. So here's some data. Let's start right from, childhood. Let's look at little children. Are they already, if it's all biology, they should already be worse at math. So does the data show that? Turns out, you ask 3-year-old children to count, they're very good with numbers 1 and 2. That's great. Not good news after that. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. 1 and 2 are good numbers. Everything after that doesn't mean much, right? So there's no difference in their cognitive skills at that point. No, clearly. So then, you know, and many studies have shown this, and at different ages. We're talking about younger children. So of course, then the next argument that is brought forth is, well, then the hormones come in. There are differences in hormones between men. Apparently, we don't think with our brains. Apparently, there are other parts of our bodies that control our math skills. Who knows? Leave it at that. Well, let's test that. So again, many tests, and I'm only showing you a few of these studies, or 1 or 2, frankly. Here's a study which actually tracks math aptitude, through tests and standardized kinds of ways of testing for ability, 4 different age groups, all the way from 4 years to 18 years, and tries to track whether there's an actual difference between male and female students. Really not much until right at the end, at maybe 12th grade, you start seeing a little bit of a divergence. And then the question is, well, what happens in 12th grade? Well, we're talking about 17 and 18-year-olds, young men and women. Of course, by then, there's all kinds of other environmental, contextual pressures happening. That is no indication of any kind of natural development. And this has been studied even more carefully back, I believe the first such study was back, first really big study was in the 1990, where essentially what this person Hyde did was she collected 100 different studies from all different areas on math skills across all kinds of schools, all kinds of backgrounds of students, put it all together so that she had a data set of over something like 3 million students. So we're talking really solid data. And what she found is the distribution looks something like that. And this is important because not only does it show that on average the scores are the same, more or less, the tiny little bit of difference which is within the errors, the tails are the same. Remember how there's this argument that, oh, women or female students, they are good, but they're not as good as the boys. In which case, the group that does much better, this should be different for the girls and the boys. Boys should have much higher scores on the good side, but they don't. And this has been proved over and over again. There's been international studies of this as well. This one was a US study. It was repeated again in 2008. And in fact, even less of a difference was found. Because of course, girls are actually doing better and better in schools these days. So really, these are myths. And yet, you go to, in most cases, you go to school, you talk to teachers, you talk to parents, in fact, and you will still hear this, oh, boys they're the ones who do the technical stuff better, right? And girls, not so much. So why bother? So it's weird that we have all this data, and we are not changing our mindset. And it's not just the men who are not changing their mindset. Women are just as guilty of thinking of other women as not competent in math and science. And that's really, I think, sad. we like to confirm age-old beliefs, I guess, is what's happening here. We don't like to be told we were wrong, I guess. There's a lot of this kind of, myth-busting in this really interesting book called The Same Difference. It's by Rosalind Barnett, who's a journalist, and Carol Rivers, who's a psychologist. And they do studies themselves, and they've collected a lot of data to sort of debunk all of these, well-known kinds of myths around women being able to do math and science. So why not? Why are all of these, good data, good studies not helping? Well, this brings me back to the same problem of not knowing women like Cecilia Payne and Henrietta Leavitt and Wilhelmina Fleming, and not be able to name them just like you name Newton and Einstein and Kepler and whoever else, right? So it's about cultural bias, cultural stereotypes, and about what is the popular notion. These turn out to be academic studies, which the media is not picking up on. The academic research and data has to become part of the popular culture. That's not what happened. Pop culture is determined by TV, newspapers, internet. And if you think about what TV and newspapers and internet are telling us, it's not this data. Right? It's telling us things which confirm, a particular image of what a scientist is. And in fact, this is also a test, right? A very famous test called the Draw a Scientist test, where, students are just asked to draw a scientist. It's been done in Canada, the US, all over the world, for different age groups. Usually younger students, right, around 10-year-olds and so on. And here's what they draw. So, similar. Guys are white, guys are black. It's very, authentic. So it's the Einstein effect, right? Especially the crazy hair. So, but it's basically almost always a man. Now there are fewer studies where, there's this work where you try to first address these gender stereotypes with classes of kids, and then you ask them to do the drawing, and you start seeing differences. So you can, it's not like all bad news. You can address these cultural stereotypes, but perhaps the real way to do it is not just through the data. The data is, of course, important, and those tests are important, but there's more to it. And it's across the board. This is what young kids are being exposed to, so this is what they think. And the truth is, if you are, let's say, a girl who's kind of interested in science and so on, one way to choose your career, in fact, probably the most important way to choose your career is you dream, you see yourself, you see yourself as an actress, or you see yourself as a doctor or a lawyer. You don't see yourself as that. Or at least, maybe I did, I don't know why I chose physics. But this is part of the problem. We have to start helping girls and boys see themselves in these careers. That's part of why we need those stories of Payne and Fleming and others to be out there in the public sphere. It should not be such a secret. And these are stories that will inspire both boys and girls. Imagine, what a story. And it's part of what we need to do to address this issue. And it's not just about TV and internet and so on. This is a study which was done to explore how parents influence their kids. Very important group. We can't ignore that when we're talking about kids. Right? So this is done to study how parents react to questions by their sons versus their daughters. Questions about science. This was done by taking the group of parents and kids to a science museum, where of course naturally the kids will ask questions. And they studied how the parents were reacting. And what this shows is that those bars show how long and how carefully the parents answered the question. To the boy versus the girl. Yeah, so parents are much more likely to take the time to answer a science question by their son compared to their daughter. In rate the IQ of their kids. On average, they rate the sons to be higher than their daughters, which is part of the problem. And it's not just the parents, of course, all of this ends up translating into differences in how men and women are evaluated in careers. So this is a study done, I believe, for applications to a prestigious fellowship in Sweden, a medical fellowship. And what was found was that the applications were rated for their, for their research academic quality, and then, so they were, they looked at the quality of the publication, the number of publications, the usual thing, and they had a scale and a grid, and they rated it. And on average, the men were rated much higher. And what the study did was to look actually at the CVs, and even when the women's CV was better than the man, they were rated on average 2.5 times lower. And again, this is one of many studies that have shown this. So, perceptions, unfortunately. Here's another one which is really depressing too, very recent one. This was from 2012. And this was, I believe, done in Yale, or done by a group at Yale, where again they gave out applications for a job as a lab technician to be evaluated by faculty members, and they looked at different disciplines, physics, chemistry, biology, across the board, and they gave the application to both male faculty members and female faculty members. And all that they did was half of the application had a male name, the applicant was male, or half of them were, the applicants were female. It was exactly the same CV. And they asked the faculty members to rate these CVs. Who would they hire, and how much would they pay? And across the board, whether it's a male professor or a female professor, whether it's biology, chemistry, physics, you name it, engineering, no matter what, across the board, the male applicant was rated higher and was offered more. This is 2012. So depressing. Yes, I know, unfortunately. But I think not all bad news. These are things. It's good that we're now at a point where we are actually documenting, just like we had hard data to prove that there's no difference in math skills, we now have hard data to prove that there is real discrimination that is based on unconscious bias. And that's the starting point to make changes. And really there's many, many other ways. As you can see, science itself has a particular gender attached to it, whether we want to or not. Here is the dominant sort of picture. If you ask a group of people, and this is sort of what I did myself randomly, I went around and asked colleagues and students and friends to give me words to describe science and scientists. What are scientists like? What is science about? Here are the words I got. Yeah. You agree? I'll show you another list, which I know personally from my own work, and how I do science is really important. But now try to visualize the words on the left as a person, or what society attributes as characteristics of a man versus a woman. It's really amazing. Science itself has been given a particular personality and gender. Science itself. So it's really amazing that there are so many ways where we, unconsciously bias one way or the other. So what can we do? There's another huge bias which is about family and work-life balance and how women can't really have it all. And women who are very smart, they don't get partners who, are going to be, involved in good relationships with them. They're not going to be able to raise their kids well. And in fact, there too, you can collect data and look at who's getting married, what's their education level. You can look at publicly available data about divorce, about relationships, time, all kinds of things. And the truth typically confident, smart people, just like men. There's no difference, again, another huge myth around it, that women are somehow not likable, not approachable. They're smart and scientific. They're geeky. They're like the Big Bang Theory kind of. All those there, but they're all men anyway, right? So I've been at talks where I talk, and one time, just last week, I gave a talk in Milton, and this one person came up to me and said to me, she says, "That was really great. I liked it so much, and you're not at all like Sheldon." TV show. I don't know what to say to that, but anyhow. So, unfortunately, lots of stereotypes, but we know now really clearly what the problem is. We've known for a long time, but we should be doing things. So, what we are trying to do now at Laurier through this Center for Women in Science is to address exactly these kinds of questions. Not the hard data, because we know that there is no difference. So, our mission now is to build a diverse community of science, because the truth is this will benefit not just the women, but society in general. We're sort of hurting ourselves as a society by not, addressing this directly. So our mission is this, and the way we approach it is through this motto of explore, engage, and connect, which means one of the things that I feel very strongly about, I'm sure you can tell, is that there are amazing stories about women out there. There are role models, female role models in science. They're there. We don't have to somehow create new ones. They're there. Let's at least spread the word. So a lot of what we do at our center is we promote women scientists. We give talks. We go out there. We talk to high school students. We have public lectures by high-profile female scientists whenever we can. So we want to change this idea that all the top scientists are all male. So that's something we can do directly. There's clearly an effect there. Clearly we don't know these stories. One of the things that's upcoming is we're building a website where women scientists hopefully will be submitting their stories. And I encourage you all to also think about doing that, writing your own stories, and encourage those who may have a story to tell those stories, because those help. Believe me, I know, because I was one of those students who was lucky to have those kinds of role models that I found out about. The other thing we do is engage, as in we have all these initiatives where we, as I said, go out to the high school, we bring students in to Laurier, and we have workshops and activities around science. It's, whatever we can do to build that community, get the support. Waterloo is a great place to do this. There's already a lot of interest in science here. So it's kind of not that hard. You just have to, connect the science to this question of gender as well, and address both at the same time. So one thing we're very, very big on is to try to bring into this conversation the female scientists, but also experts on gender studies. All these studies have been done not by scientists. Some of them have been done by scientists, natural scientists, but a lot of them are done by social scientists and experts, psychologists and sociologists and so on. So we want to connect those groups. Surprisingly enough, that's apparently not done. Once we came up with this, we found out that this kind of a center doesn't exist. Most groups of women, there are many organizations of women in science, involve the female scientists, but not those who address gender issues. So we're trying to bridge that gap, and hopefully that will help us be more efficient in what we do. And the final piece, the connect, is about connecting outside of Laurier, of course, as well. So to groups like you, to other institutions, we have the University of Waterloo, we have Perimeter Institute, we have an advisory board where we have members from both academia and industry. We have high school teachers involved. We do a lot of work with high schools and younger students. So, we haven't been active for that long. We just got officially launched in 2012. But since that time, we've started building collaborations, and we've done activities as well as future initiatives coming along with a whole bunch of different organizations, and I hope that we can add you to our list as well. At some stage, I think there are many common issues that, and a lot of experience here that I hope will help us to move forward with our own goals. We do, as I said, we've been doing a lot of activities and have generated quite a bit of interest. We do get a lot of traffic on our website, and we try to create excitement in the community by bringing the wonder of science, not just always about the women. That comes naturally as long as we organically don't ignore the women, but organically include both the women's stories and all stories around science. And so we've done some really fun things like, we of course try to be relevant. I myself